Chapter 4: Social Welfare Policy in the 19th Century. As the population continued to rise with people immigrating to the country throughout the 19th century, social welfare began to take the forefront of everyone's minds. Americans developed three kinds of social policies in the early and mid-19th century. This included moral treatment for alcoholism and mental illness. It also provided many Americans with voting rights, public education, and the abolition of imprisonment for indebtedness. Thirdly, they added policies to control, regulate, and oppress people of color. Two of the biggest fears during the 1800s were alcoholism and pauperism. Thus, the birth of the temperance and anti-pauperism movements began. At the height of its time in 1833, the temperance movement had 6,000 chapters. The movement was so influential that in the 1840s and 1850s, 13 states enacted prohibitions on the sale of alcohol. Most states repealed these acts in the 1870s, and a nationwide prohibition was later enacted with the Volstead Act of 1919. During the same time as the temperance movement, Americans feared pauperism as much as alcoholism. With the mass influx of immigrants that were mostly penniless with no job skills, the poor population had swelled to alarming rates. To combat this problem, American reformers devised three major strategies. The first strategy sought to vastly increase the number of homeless shelters and to modify their internal operations to make them truly deterrent. The second strategy tried to establish personal contact with millions of low-income youth to break the cycle of poverty. The third tried to establish systems of surveillance so that charity was not given randomly to destitute people. During this time, there was also a large amount of discrimination against women and Irish immigrants. In 1848, at a convention in Seneca Falls, New York, the Seneca Falls Convention was formed. The 32 men and 68 women created a Declaration of Sentiments modeled after the Declaration of Independence that fought for women's equality. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and fellow feminists also began the fight for equality, but eventually split into the American Women's Suffrage Association and the National Women's Suffrage Association. Their hard work led to 12 states enacting universal suffrage by 1917, and eventually the 19th Amendment in 1920. After the potato famine, about 1.5 million Irish immigrants fled to the United States from 1845 to 1854. The U.S. frequently turned ships of Irish immigrants away, claiming they looked too diseased. The immigrants that were able to make it into America were only permitted to work unskilled jobs such as cleaning stables or unloading boats. The immigrants lived in terrible conditions with up to 9 people in one room. Cholera epidemics swept through the low-income areas, killing mostly children under the age of 15. Eventually, they band together and got Irish mayors into office that helped them get better jobs and protected them against discrimination and violence.